Hello and welcome back to Back Corner Comics. Today's topic of discussion is going to be the indie comics that I feel like nobody talks about enough. So yeah, let's get into it proper. So the first title that we're going to be talking about today is Not Away Volume 1 and 2. It is a little cheating because we are talking about two volumes, but this is a epic by Joshua Cotter that is going to potentially be 8 volumes, I believe. Only two have been published so far from Fantagraphics. I don't think it's continuing at Fantagraphics. I believe Joshua is going to be self publishing them in the future. But we have these two from Fantagraphics, and yeah, let's get into them. So, this series really focuses on humanity's it's hard to describe because it's an epic, right? And we've seen so little of what it's going to end up becoming. But you have a main character here who is assigned to work on a space station. There's a lot of stuff that happens. There's also this other narrative going on with this man here who wakes up and he wanders through a desert. It's kind of biblical, but it also, I believe this takes place after that initial part, that initial beginning with this woman here. But what I really want to focus on is not necessarily the plot too much, but the cartooning of Joshua Cotter. So he is really talented. I think he's one of the best American cartoonists. I've had this book for a very long time. I'm looking forward to the third installment. He's been posting some penciled pages over on his website. And the story does get violent. There is this thing about old, beings from another dimension showing up. There's this love story here that's happening, and the way he does these like panels where they just turn into like pure lines is amazing. Fantastic stuff. I think the voice that Joshua works with, like the comics he makes with his voice are just phenomenal, and they're different. And so yeah, if this even remotely interests you, I really recommend picking it up. I don't think we have a cartoonist working today that thinks like Josh. And like I said, I look forward to the third installment of Not Away. This deals with a lot of stuff about technology and integrating human minds with technology. And this just means something. I think that's representing the soul. But yeah, great stuff by Joshua Cotter. And yeah, this is Not Away. Next up on the list is Nathan Cowdrey's Crash Site. So this really feels like a Adult Swim animation, and his art style is very shoujo-esque, if you're familiar with that. I love the way that he draws women's eyes and how he, just draws women in general. Very good stuff. So this story is a bit of a strange one. This girl and her dog get into a plane crash and they have to survive in the wilderness. She has a pair of panties that are sentient and they talk to her. I believe they're extremely pervy. But one of the things I love about Nathan is his ability to draw these very anime, cartoony-esque characters, but then the backgrounds are very abstract, kind of, and it just blends so well. It makes it look like the character is an animation cell. There is this subtlety to his art, and then you get this crazy violence. I believe this is a dream. So Act 1 you have there. Rosie is our main character. As you can tell, it is for mature readers. So if you are, not of age, do not look into this. But if this suits your fancy, I really recommend picking it up. He's actually working on a war epic. That's the title of it, but it's also, a war epic. And this has similar vibes. I wonder if by doing this portion of the story, he felt like doing doing war epic. But yeah, very good stuff. Here he is. He is a badass individual, as you can tell. And yeah, this is Crash Site. So, World Within the World is interesting for a lot of reasons. It's a compilation of various zines that Julia Gorferer made. And one of the most interesting parts of this collection is that they retained the sort of various colors of the zines. And that adds to the content of each story. And it's also a gorgeous hardcover. So Fantagraphics really believes in this cartoonist and in this release. I think the image of the goose eating itself is very beautiful, very horrifying, just like all of the stories in here. And here's all of the various zines collected in here. You have various twist on Edgar Allan Poe stories, some fairy tale stuff. Here's like a, like a little zine right here, a little mini one-page comic sort of thing. A lot of these stories focus on sort of women's struggle, women trauma. It's really beautiful stuff. And the various colors of the pages are just so powerful. I know that might be a turnoff for a lot of people, but I think it adds a lot to this particular collection. You know, this story is very beautiful. There is a adaptation that she does of the Casket of Amontadillo. I hope I said that right. I think it's this one. Is it this one? No, it is not. Well, whatever. That particular story is very good. It's this one right here. It deals with a gay man. It's not only about women, but there's some queer elements in here. It's a very good. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce the title of that story, but you can tell her cartooning is just next level. Got these beautiful panels here. This is a really great story as well. Forgiveness. But yeah, I think this one really needs to be looked into if you like anything remotely. If you remotely like anything of what I just mentioned, I think World Within the World is a great pickup for you. So that is that. Next up is Real Deal by Lawrence Raw Dog Hubbard and RDBone, or AKA RDBone. So this is a self-published, or it was a self-published comic. I think it only lasted like 2 or 3 issues, and it was done by complete amateurs who loved comics, but they were busy, working, and they didn't really have, the opportunities that a lot of cartoonists have. So they decided to self-publish their comic, and their comic is really insane, kind of crazy. In a lot of ways, this is like a precursor to Super Jail in a way. I don't know if there's an exact connection between Super Jail, which is a very famous cartoon on Adult Swim, and Real Deal, but there is elements of this zany moment-to-moment violence that can kind of just happen. And a lot of the stories in here will follow like gangsters, like here you go. These are not good people, and you can tell that the cartoonists just really wanted to have fun with this series, and that they did. This is a cool comic to pick up. It is so fun. It is zany. It is weird. It is super id. You know, the id factor is all throughout it, every panel, every page, you know, every story beat. It is relentless in the id factor. And if you're anything like me, you love the id factor. This feels like it could only come from two guys that were working, you know, these dead end jobs in the hood. There is violence against women, so if you know you're against that, I would not pick this up. But you know, it's in cartooning fun, I guess, cartoony violence. But I understand how some people can't stomach those things. You got some sideways stuff here. I've actually never read this stuff, like this part of it. But I first came to uh, attention. This first came to my attention through Cartoonist Kayfabe, and they actually interviewed, I believe, one of the creators because the other one passed away. So rest in peace. One of them passed away, and they interviewed the other one, and it was really cool to kind of like hear him talk about this book. And actually, the first time they printed the first issue, it was way too big because he didn't know the measurements, right? And he needed to get it to press. So he kind of gave them whatever measurements, or he selected whatever, you know, measurements that was an option there. And it was like super massive. I mean, it's just like huge. It's a huge issue, and you know, it's a highly collectible issue that people, you know, prize, and you know, all that stuff. But yeah, if you like Super Geo, if you like Adult Swim, this is kind of like a precursor. Here they are. This is kind of like a precursor to those types of stories. And, you know, this is a lot of fun. It's beautiful. It looks great. You know, it shines on the shelf, literally. You know, it has that bling bling. But yeah, that is Real Deal. Okay, and the next title on our list is going to be Frank Johnson, Secret Pioneer of American Comics, Volume 1. So, the story behind this particular title is there was this cartoonist named Frank Johnson who was really just filling his notebooks with these various comic strip like stories, and nobody knew about him. You know, he was making the comics for himself. And so when he passed away a few generations afterwards, his family donated all of his, not all of, because some of them were lost to time, but the notebooks that they could find, they donated to a museum. I don't remember the name of it. But basically, the editor of this book and Fantagraphics collected some of those and are going to be publishing them. And this is volume 1 of that effort. Most of the stuff in here is pencil work, but don't let that make you have any prejudice towards this release, because the truth is the cartooning in here is phenomenal. And the stories are very good too. This kind of introductory story that they start with is, there's a really good intro by the editor of this book, and I recommend reading it if you pick this up, because it gives you a lot of background details that just give so much texture to this story and to this this release and the stories within. So this is about the Bowser Boys, who are a bunch of like homeless alcoholics, and the stuff in here is so funny. This is a great story. I enjoyed it a lot. But that's not the only thing collected in here. So Frank Johnson's kind of big story was, look, Wally's Gang book 111. So these characters were created initially when he was a young boy, and he carried on the stories throughout his adulthood, and some of them are missing. So the only ones they could really find are, let's see here. Okay, so that's the end of Bowser Boys, and this is the beginning of Wally's, of what they could find of these. I don't know if it's going to have the number on here right away, but let's see. So I believe this is book 91. So he had been writing these characters for a very, very long time and filling these notebooks up with these amazing stories. And it's insane to me that he never thought about pitching his story to a newspaper because they would have picked it up. And this guy is the secret pioneer of American comics. You know, he was doing a lot of stuff before the newspaper strips were. And it's kind of a shame that his brilliance was hidden for so long, but because of Fantagraphics, we can pick this book up and enjoy his work. So shouts out to Fantagraphics for doing this. Great stuff. And so next up on the list is the official Lloyd Llewellyn collection. This is a trade paperback collecting 13 stories from the Lloyd Llewellyn series, which was Daniel Clowes's first kind of major published work. It was kind of cut short because the sales were really bad, and I think Daniel Clowes really did not like his work here, and he denounced it in a lot of ways. And, you know, this particular collection is very, very much out of print. You know, you can't really find it anywhere for a decent price. And this is also a disclaimer to the rest of the stuff on the list. Some of the titles we're talking about today are out of print, and that could be why, you know, not a lot of people are talking about them. But not a lot of people bring up Lloyd Llewellyn when they discuss, you know, Daniel Clowes. They talk about 8-Ball, they talk about David Boring, they talk about Monica, you know, so they talk about his more known work. But I think Lloyd Llewellyn is a fantastic title, and I think he's a little rough on himself for saying it's so bad, because I enjoy it. I love the character of Lloyd Llewellyn. He's a bit of, like, you know, a fuck up, and reminds me, Tedward reminded me a lot of Lloyd Llewellyn. Look, you get this old school Fantagraphics logo. Lots of zipatone, very thin line work. A great introduction here. But I treasure this book. Hound Blood. But yeah, not a lot of people talk about Lloyd Llewellyn. I wish there was more of a conversation about this title. And if you've read A Velvet Glove Cast in Iron, you can definitely see that early Clowes zipatone use and very thin lines, where now he kind of does these thick lines. And in the later 8-Ball series, he uses, you know, exclusively brushes almost. But yeah, this is the Lloyd Llewellyn collection. One day we will do a complete review of, wow, look at that, a young Daniel Clowes. One day we will do a review of the entirety of Lloyd Llewellyn. But I just kind of wanted to put this on the list so that way more people could be aware of it and maybe look into getting this very hardcore out of print type of, you know, book. And I hope Fantagraphics reprints Lloyd Llewellyn at some point. That would be fantastic. Okay, next up on the list. Now, the last book up on our list, and the only cartoonist that gets 2 entries on this list, the cartoonist being Joshua Cotter, and then the title being Skyscrapers of the Midwest. You know, this particular book really tugged on a lot of heartstrings, being, you know, displaced and living in a rural area of the country. And, you know, Joshua Cotter really puts his personal life into this story in a very beautiful way. I'm a big fan of his entire, you know, catalog of comics. And yeah, let's get into the book proper. This is another title that's unfortunately out of print. Hopefully, you know, Joshua Cotter sees to get this self-published at some point. This is a Ad House book. As you can see right here, Ad House does not do any more. They've ceased operations. originally published in 2008. But the cartooning here is beautiful. The main character has these like moments where he daydreams about this giant robot. If you like graphic novels that are very character driven, this is definitely up your alley. As you can tell, all of the characters are like these little animals. I hate Sunday. There's a lot about religion here, and if you've ever been forced to go to church on Sunday, you know how awful that can be. You get a lot of really cool editorial type of pages like this in between and in the chapters of the book. The book is separated into books. So you can tell that was book 2. He plays a lot with different art styles. There's even a moment within this book where he does a Jim Lee sort of art style, and that was a lot of fun. But yeah, it does get very trippy sometimes. This was one of my favorite reads of 2022. Time goes by so fast when you're reading books, reading comics. There's like this cicada kind of imagery throughout it. His grandmother does get cancer, and he explores that kind of grief within this title. And yeah, I mean, this is a must buy. You can get a digital copy at the Joshua Cotter website. I was lucky to get this when Ad House Books put their remainder stock on sale on eBay. But as you can tell, it's wonderfully drawn. It's a wonderfully told story, and I love it to pieces. Now, there is kind of like a coda to this entire story, and that's only if you got like a particular edition of it. It comes with this little slipcase, and it comes with this additional story here. Skyscrapers, draw, inspire, synergize, 10-year report and accounts. So this is like a, it's a special sort of edition. You get this little lithograph that's numbered. There was only 100 of these editions made. I don't like showing off stuff that's limited or out of print, like I said. And as you can tell, it's just pure pencil work. And it really shows how great of a cartoonist Joshua Cotter is. And I cannot wait until Not Away Volume 3 gets released, or if he does like a special self-published thing. There's also a fund that you can contribute to called the Not Away Fund, and that goes towards helping Joshua Cotter finish Not Away Volume 3. But yeah, so that is the list of books. I really enjoyed all of these titles, and I really wish I could have more of a conversation with other people about them. And that was kind of my inspiration to making this list. If you liked the video, please like and share it. Comment down below. Tell me if you've read any of these titles, if you're interested in any of these titles. And yeah, that's the video. And this is Back Corner Comics. Thank you for watching.